sorry about that hiatus. Like most of us, I'm a beginner at this Zoom business. Chloe's been brilliant in guiding me there. My name's Mike, as you probably gathered, and I run the Cornish Global Migration Program based in Redruth. Before we start telling you what we do, I thought I'd remind you why the Cornish Diaspora is so important. A couple of well-known Cornish historians highlighted this some years ago. A.L. Rouse, the great Cambridge Elizabethan historian and a Cornishman, said that the story of the Cornish emigration is the biggest and most significant of Cornish themes. Then Professor Philip Payton, whom I'm sure many of you know, he called it Cornwall is one of the great emigration regions of Europe. I feel that the Cornish diaspora is an essential part of our culture. It's part of almost part of our being Cornish. And one question I do ask, and I don't know the answer, I bet there are a lot more people living outside of Europe who are Cornish than there are actually in Cornwall. But having said that, I'll tell you now more about us. Right, so I just mentioned why I consider the Cornish diaspora, the migration from Cornwall, so important. Our organisation, the Cornish Global Migration Project, we're based at Murdoch House in Redruth. And as you can see, because you can all see my nice notes, this is the first house in the world that was lit by gas. It's under the management of a registered charity, and we occupy the top 2 floors of the building. They're accessed by the external stairs, as you can see in the sketch of the house. We're a 10-minute walk away from Crescent Kerno in Redruth. We're a not-for-profit organisation. We're run by volunteers, and that's why I don't have a lot of technical ability. Unfortunately, we're presently closed due to the virus. Now, the objects of our programme are quite ambitious. First of all, it's to create a virtual memorial to all born in Cornwall and who migrated. We aim to provide details of the life and times of each and every migrant family. We also hope to provide statistical data to aid in the understanding of the great Cornish diaspora. Ambitiously, we're creating a repository to aid in the study of Cornish migration. We also, in a new project, are hoping to facilitate the publication of books exploring all aspects of the Cornish migration. The heart of our research is a migration database. We aim to record as much detail concerning each life from birth to death. Some of you will probably already know that it is estimated that in the Victorian era, some 250,000 migrated to regions outside of the British Isles, and another 250,000 to other countries within the British Isles. Our work so far, we've accumulated data on 270,000 migrants. Many of those records are rather scant, others are very comprehensive, but the work continues. Each migrant has their own individual record, and that's important. In the past, spouses, i.e. wives and children in particular, who were born in Cornwall and migrated overseas, tended not to be recorded in detail. Perhaps overlooked in the past, which gives the impression that was the process of migration was mainly a male affair. We don't think so. What information do we record? Birth, obviously, where, when. We want to know who the parents were, their dates and their location. The spouse, we want to know who they were, their birth and death dates, their date and place of marriage, etc. Obviously, we want to know the migration moves. Where and when did they go? And of course, finally, death. Where, when, how, memorials, probate, etc. We don't do this in simple things. We want to know all the life history, activities, all activities from birth to death. With the life histories from birth to death, we collect newspaper reports, obituaries, births, births, marriages and deaths, visits home, accident reports. We like copies of official documents, birth, marriage, death certificates, passenger lists, court records, naturalization documents, census records. We love migrant letters. In fact, that's a topic I think is close to Chloe Phillips' heart. We record any military service, memorials, remittance records, and family photographs. We've set ourselves a very ambitious program. Anybody who searched their own family can just say, oh God, how can they actually research 500,000 people? The database enables us to extract some rather interesting information. One of the first ones I like is their regions of origin within Cornwall. I've drawn up a CGM of divided Cornwall into 9 geographical regions. These help us to work out from what part of Cornwall the migrants originated from. This chart, which is extracted from the database has been set up so it not only provides individual information, but also enables us to extract information which I find particularly interesting. So of the 9 regions, we can see whereabouts they came from. This is in fact pretty even, although very often, as you can see, the central mining region is the most popular place for migration, which is not surprising, but is what is surprising is that other regions, particularly say the southwest of Cornwall, which includes from Penzance down to St Just Pendine, was also a very productive place for migrants. We do also, and a lot of people are interested in this, note the destinations of those people. Again, because we program the database to tell us, we can tell which regions in the world they migrated to. We're a bit megalomaniac in the program, so we divided the world up into 12 regions. The one that is perhaps of great interest are the British Isles. Most migration records tend to think about non-European destinations, but as we've already seen, that perhaps half the people who were born in Cornwall and left Cornwall to live elsewhere actually moved across to other countries within the British Isles, England, Wales and Ireland. I find that interesting because when we analyse those who moved to the British Isles, we find that there's an awful lot of ladies who migrated. Sometimes in migration records, we tend to think of a male thing, but no, there were a lot of ladies involved as well. And because of our figures for the British Isles, it's surprising to know out of the 270,000 odd records we have, almost half of them are for females. Canada, Central America, Europe. Europe figures quite high because, unfortunately, war. We do include certain individuals who got involved in military conflicts. South America, unknown. USA, most popular destination. Our figures are perhaps slightly skewed. For instance, if we go back to Australia, I do know that that's grossly unrepresented, perhaps because we ourselves haven't focused our research on Australia, but that will be corrected over time. We can drill down into the record. Sorry, I'll get back to that. We can drill down into the record. Now, these figures are way out of date. So you see on the left-hand side, the USA, I've said there's 26,000. In fact, our records are now up to 34,000 for the USA. But I can ask the database to tell us how many went to a particular state in America, in this case, Wisconsin. I can then ask it, Wisconsin is divided into many counties. I can then ask it to tell me how many went to Iowa County in Wisconsin. Keeps turning. I can then ask it how many went to Iowa County in Wisconsin, and then how many of those in Iowa County actually went to Mineral Point. Now, I do know that many of you will perhaps be familiar with Mineral Point. But as I say, those figures are a little way. The point is that we can drill down into the records quite simply as the database develops, and we can do a similar exercise for all other regions around the globe. Now, this is contentious. In contemporary migration studies, there's a lot of emphasis placed on trying to differentiate what sort of migrants they were. We are totally and utterly open. We don't have any restraints. So we do include descendants, that is, children born to Cornish migrants, but we don't focus on that. We only add them when we're doing a particular region. For instance, Mexico or perhaps Malta or somewhere. The migrant we love most is the linear migrant. They were born in Cornwall, migrated to another country and died there. They were rather simple in that. Lots of people, we don't know exactly where they died, and so we leave, until we've got verification of that, we leave them as unknown. Return migrants, a surprising number of people having worked overseas for years, return to live in their home country. Trans-migrants, these are the families who move from one country to another. The Cornish miner and their families tend to be terribly footloose. We are playing with it because we're talking about emigration, but of course the other side of the Cornish immigrants, those who came to settle within Cornwall, we've been playing with the database to ensure that at some stage it will accommodate if we want to record immigrants. At the moment, we've only done some very historic records, namely people who migrated from Brittany in France to Cornwall in the 1500s. So that's a bit of an experiment. We do include non-Cornish people. I'm not born in Cornwall, no Cornish ancestry at all, but that is only particular studies. For instance, if you're working in the mines at Real del Monte in Mexico, you worked with people from other countries, and to understand their story of the Cornish migrants, you had to understand who they worked with. Not migrants left behind in Cornwall. This is really not my topic. In fact, I think she's listening to me now. It's Dr. Leslie Trotter. She's the expert on that. But we do try and record any notable incidents we have. Going down to forced migration, this tends to be a modern terminology. We probably hear it on the news all the time. People forced to migrate because of wars or starvation or climate change. In our case, forced migration tends to be those who were transported, not just to Australia, which is where we all think about the poor people who are transported there for minor criminal offences. But before Australia, we used to send people to the American colonies. Unfortunately, they had a bit of an independence war in the 1790s, so we could no longer send them there, and Australia was picked. Another form of forced migration was indentured. If you signed a contract to go to the West Indies for 5 years, often you sign that indenture because you had no other way of living your life. You were basically forced into the position. When did they migrate? We have no limit. So I think the earliest migrants date from about 1640, and we continue up to the present day. We do have one limit, and that is we only include people who are no longer living. For all sorts of technical reasons, we can't include living people. But this chart shows us from 1800 to 2010. And not surprisingly, the 1840s, 1850s was the peak period at this time. There was a big dip down in the 1860s. Part of the reason for that may well have been the American Civil War. People would have been reluctant to travel to America while the conflict was going on. The beginning, the little peak in the sort of 1812 period, that was basically the end of the Napoleonic Wars. So we can basically add history to the peak periods and why they migrated. So there might have been great poverty and unemployment. One day, and it would be interesting to do so, would be to superimpose upon graphs like this the price of tin and copper. Now I do know, and he's handed me his figure work, Bernard Deacon has done it for the period, the price of tin and copper, and I suspect those prices will go up and down with the migration periods, explaining why they had to leave Cornwall. Death decades. This particular one I find interesting because I often forget that a lot of the migrants died within living memory. There were numerous families in Cornwall who relate to their ancestors and some living ancestors who left and live in Australia, America, all around the world. You see that obviously the peak of the time when they died was in the end of the 1800s, but we have records going right up to 2019. So those of you who read the obituaries in the local newspapers, and I do every week, and I'm always very relieved when I find I'm not mentioned there, that there are still people who have close connections around the globe. So now, in our records in the database, one thing we're extremely keen on is recording memorials, usually in burial grounds, but obviously elsewhere. We record these in quite some detail in the database. A full transcript is given of each memorial because some of them are extremely difficult to read. And we also try and photograph them and obviously give a description of its locations. They provide us with invaluable information. They tell us about family relationships, not just blood relations, sons-in-laws, daughter-in-laws, and all sorts. And sometimes the symbolism on the headstones can be of great interest. A lot of these memorials, because of their age, are disappearing, usually due to neglect or weathering, but sometimes on purpose. I have surveyed a couple of burial grounds where they are being cleared out, as it were, and the memorials will disappear. I've done that in Singapore and in Mexico. Now, in our records, we do try and search out those types of records which are not readily available on the normal family research facilities, whether they are on the internet, whether it's through a paid site or even a free site. And one of the records I really do like is Naturalization Records. This is where the Cornish migrant to America became an American citizen, or began the process of becoming an American citizen, and gave up his British allegiance. They're interesting because they give me lots of fascinating information. Names, where he was born, his age, how he got to America, where he landed, where he was living, and other little subtle snippets like this chap, William Bailey. He signed his name, but in many of these, they made their mark. So that enables us to think about, well, how many of them were literate? When they made a mark, did that mean they could not read or write, or was it just because of habit? We're able to do that. These records are not easy to find. We have a marvelous collection at Murdoch House of naturalization records, which we obtained from Platteville in Wisconsin at the university there. In their archives, they've got magnificent bound volumes of these records, which have been deposited with them by the various courts. They're totally unindexed and just of in great big things. And we had a friend when I visited there. I went through them, and a friend afterwards patiently went through them all and actually photocopied all those which related to Cornwall. So in our records, we have about slightly over 1,000 copies of the actual naturalization record, which, and don't forget, a lot of these guys, this one, he was actually in Illinois, in Joe Davis County. He may well have moved on to California or somewhere. So how you find these records is really quite problematical. Now, the same with remittances. This subject is so important. Cornwall, the families left behind, so much relied upon the monies, the money. It's not easy to find quantitative and detailed records of these. Again, like the naturalization records, they tend to be hidden away in archives in various places. We have been fortunate that I found in the archives of the Real del Monte Mining Company in Mexico, in Pachuca in Mexico, in some of their ledgers, they had a list of monies the company sent on behalf of their Cornish employees back to people in Cornwall. So you see here, William Bray sent to Alice Bray £24. This was in December 1859. I think Chloe at the Crescent Kerno may well have a copy of a list of post office remittances from Michigan. And of course, within the records in those archives, there are individual families that have left. Well, I think it's the Scoble family with a collection of checks that were sent back home. These provide an insight to add an interest to each of these people. Each one will have a separate record in our database. We can add a nice story to them in that, oh yeah, James is over, and he sent a chap with the same name as him in that case. So it's probably to a savings account. But here we go. John Dennis sent Sarah Dennis £24. And so it can go into his record that he was supporting his family back at home. Not all the people who sent money were male. We have not a lot, but we have some who are female sending back home as well. So it's a two-way thing. Photographs. Now, these are far better than words. They tell us so much. We're amassing quite a nice collection of digital photographs of various migrants. Obviously, each one is added to that person's record in the database, and some of them are fascinating. Now, this chap was James Code. He was born in Cornwall in 1844, and he died in USA in 1916. But you can see his, apart from that fantastic moustache, it's also got a sheriff's badge on. This is with the wonderful name of Romilly Thomas. He was born in Cornwall in 1840. He died in Mexico in 1945, and he's pictured here with his wife Annie and his daughter Emily. Well, This magnificent lady is Sophia Porter, née Spurling, who was born in Cornwall in 1840 and died in Wales in 1928. That perhaps one day I can organise an exhibition based around the theme of faces of the Diaspora, but that's something for the future. We're not just a database, a virtual operation, we also are accumulating a repository of objects. We're trying to build up collections of all sorts of objects which help illustrate, give a tangible and tactile representation of the migration experience. Now, see here the sort of things we think about. We have, excuse me, I've got a terrible cough. We have quite a large library of books. Now, we are not trying to duplicate anything which Kiernan has, because they are just an unbelievably wonderful collection. But in our library, we tend to have books which are perhaps published overseas, perhaps privately published, and so not easy to get your hands on. We obviously have Cornish books as well. We have artifacts. We've got miners' lamps, helmets, etc. from around the world, which helps illustrate the different conditions our ancestors worked in. We have passcodes, home, works of art, migrant letters, etc. But I must move on because I'm running out of time. Amongst these artifacts, for instance, on the top left-hand corner, we have a French miner's lamp that was used by our cousins in France. We have a collection of these great big holy Bibles, Victorian Bibles, massive great things with their clasps. We have postcards. We have a fascinating collection of sweetheart jewellery. We've got about 12 of these. This particular one in its original case from a jeweller's in Johannesburg, beautiful gold one that actually won a prize from the Cornwall Museum's Object of the Year competition. Back to migrant letters. Whoops. Back to migrant letters. This one from William J. Loam, although he is using the Spanish version of his name, based in Mexico. He was sending his wife in 1921. He was sending his wife home £5. Seems like a very sad story to me, because I will send some more as soon possible, for times are hard for me. I owe a good bit of money and have to struggle along. Everything is bad. You don't seem to get any better. He then addresses his daughter in a postscript. Please tell grandson of me everything from it. I will not fail also. Send a little present for the kids and my photo when I can afford it. I don't know. We haven't verified it. This is probably a William James Loam, born in St Muir in 1860. If we've identified him correctly, then at the age of 64, 4 years after he wrote that letter, he married a Mexican lady, and he died in Mexico City in 1938. The couple have had 5 children. So I think there's a hidden story there somewhere. Right, we're almost there. This is publications, a new project on our part. We are hoping to publish a series of books concerning the Cornish diaspora. We have done 2 so far. First is a Cornish colony of Mexico, and the second was a Cornish colony in France. Both of these were published towards the end of last year and was a result of the lockdown. Right, so I'm now going to hand you back to Chloe as I see the time's ticking on a little bit, and she can take over from there. Thank you.